It's the top one, the A, I think. VMix 1. VMix 1. Oh, they can hear us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You got us now? Roger, Dodger. Okay.
Oh, good afternoon and welcome to Live Impact News right here on 13 News Now, the app. We are here at 1:02 p.m. Monday afternoon. It is May 18th. We're here with the People's producer, Nia Campbell, and this particular May 18th, I should say this particular Monday, takes on an added level of significance because with this week starts the trial of Ebony Parker. 8 charges of felony child neglect in connection with the shooting of first grade teacher Abby Zwerner at Richneck Elementary School in 2023. Abby Zwerner shot by a 6-year-old student, one of her own students, of the first grade teacher at Richneck Elementary School. And that trial has begun today with jury selection. Madison Schlegel is live outside the courthouse right now. She gave us an update this morning. She's been in court all day since then. Madison, what have you seen thus far today as this trial begins?
Connor, yeah, we're standing outside the Newport News Courthouse right now, and the judge has currently let the jury go, or the jurors, potential jurors, go for break. We've got a break for about an hour now here. But I will say that tensions already this morning have been high and emotional in the courtroom. As you mentioned there, we did listen to them read each and every single one of those 8 counts. Ebony Parker saying out loud, not guilty to every single 8 of those charges. Parker getting emotional and upset and wiping a tear or two away from her face while answering those questions and saying not guilty. Just moments after that happened, the judge did clear some recess so that the jurors could come into the room. At that moment, that's when we saw Ebony Parker did break down a little bit and started getting a little emotional and crying. Obviously, as you can imagine, this is such an impactful case and the heartstrings here really are going to be pulled. But that brings us to what happened right as court started back up after we left you at 10 o'clock this morning. Since then, we've brought all the jurors into the room. We've got 84 potential jurors that we've been hearing from today, with the potential of 12 to 14, which they need to seat. They need 12 jurors, but they want 2 alternates, so that brings us to that 14 number. But you know, all week since last week, we were telling you that the potential of finding jurors or unbiased jurors in this case was going to be a little bit of a challenge, and we've already seen some of that challenge play out in the courtroom today. So I want to give you a little bit of snapshot about some of those questions that not only the judge but the prosecution was asking the jury today, and some of those questions gave us some of those stark answers that we've been proving. So starting off, more than half of the jury, so at least 10 to 20 people say that they've seen coverage of this trial online. We've got 5, 10, 15, 20, 22 people who said that they watched the civil trial play out back in October and November. That was a civil trial that was filed by Abby Zwerner, the former teacher who was shot in this shooting. So people have said that they were tuning into that trial, and 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 26, 27 of those 84 potential jurors said that they've already got a formal opinion of whether they think Ebony Parker is guilty or innocent already. Now, when asked by those jurors if they could suspend some of their preconceived notions about the case, it truly was a mixed bag from those people who answered that they do have preconceived notions. We heard some people who said that they wouldn't be able to help but be biased in this situation. We heard people say that they would try their best to be biased but couldn't promise anything. We heard people who said, absolutely, I can be unbiased. We had people who said, I absolutely cannot be unbiased in this situation. So we're seeing a lot of those dynamics play out in the newsroom. Another dynamic we're also dealing with in the courtroom today is the amount amount of people in that 84 juror count right now who are involved in the Newport News public school system. That was of the first questions that were kind of asked today, and right away we started seeing juror numbers pop up into the sky saying that people had affiliations or concerns that they thought would be an issue in this case. Again, 84 people today, so all we've gotten through this so far this morning has been the prosecution's end of the jury questions that were slated. They answered all of the questions that the prosecution had to lay out. We're pausing for lunch now, and then when we come back from lunch, the defense will have their opportunity to scan the jurors or potential jurors to ask their questions about biases in the case. But again, Connor, as we've been telling you, we knew that it was going to be a little bit of a shakeup out here as to how people were going to come into this courtroom today, whether they had watched coverage of this case or not, knowing that it has spanned not just here in Newport News, but across the country. And already we're starting to see those dynamics play themselves out today. But it's just going to be another hour again of break, and then back into the courtroom where we hear the defense's questions for the potential jurors. Connor.
Yeah, Madison, that was a really thorough and insightful sort of explanation as to why this jury selection process is so complicated and where they stand in that process. 1:55 p.m., as Madison said, they'll be back in order to give more questions to those jurors to try and parse out how they can make the most unbiased, fair, and balanced jury that they can. But the other part of that is the high-profile nature of this case. And we were watching the live stream on our morning edition of Live Impact News, and it even shone through just within that little sort of early morning snippet of court proceedings, in that at one point I think somebody asked if the judge could move the microphone a little closer to her face. There were, discussions with, hey, make sure that, towards the camera person, of making sure that they follow certain procedures. For you, having covered trials before, how unique is this in terms of the amount of attention that needs to be paid to the coverage and the headline generating profile of this case?
Yeah, I mean, we want to be very transparent about how we're covering cases like this. As the media, our job is to come here and show you what's happening, how it unfolds. And with that are a slew of protections in place to make sure that the potential jurors that are involved in this case, those 84 people, also have a sense of anonymity here, So jurors are only being referred to by their number per a court-issued order that was released to us as media. Again, you're mentioning that live stream there, Connor, but that live stream that people are watching back home is on a 30-minute delay, and that's by the judge. That was issued by the judge. That 30-minute delay basically being because of the sensitive matters here in this case. So obviously we're talking about the Newport News Public School Division, and on top of that, that also deals with minors and children who are named in this case and will be referenced throughout the trial as well. So that again is another reason why we've got this 30-minute delay. So in case a name of a potential minor or a name or a face of someone does get dropped or caught on camera potentially, that we're able to catch it and provide that sense of anonymity for people. Because even though we are here wanting to bring you the facts as they happen, we also want to make sure that we're being respectful of people during this very tense time. We know over the last 3 years it's been a slew of drama and trials and cases that have gone through. And the people here in the community, obviously, per their answers in the room, were very open about the fact that this has been something that people in the community have been talking about. So we are, again, bringing you this trial as it unfolds. We do have that 30-minute hold for live streaming, so that delay that you're seeing is 30 minutes. But when it comes to reporting the information that comes out of the courtroom, we're able to give you that information the second that it comes out of the judges or any of the attorneys' mouths. So we're in the courtroom, working you to bring that information as it unfolds. Again, what you are seeing at home is going to be on a 30-minute delay, but 30 minutes on a case this big truly isn't going to be that much of a time. We're going to be here covering it for you, not just today, but for the rest of the week. Connor, I also want to mention that we've been previewing that this case is scheduled from today to run through the end of this week, the 21st, I do believe. But the judge has told us that it could go on longer if needed. They've been saying that, but the judge did tell us today that she hopes this is going to be a speedy trial. So she hopes that it doesn't go beyond that 4-day mark. She doesn't want to see this go into the next week. She believes that this is going to be a case that is going to be heard, going to be responded to, and then get a speedy answer from those people who are selected to be represented as jury members today, pardon me. So again, in a case that we've been waiting 3 years to kind of see how it shakes out, hopefully by the end of this week there will be a verdict in this case. But until then, we'll be live here in Newport News bringing you all the updates that you need to hear. Connor.
All right, a complicated case in more ways than one, but still a case that the judge is hoping to get done in a speedy manner. Last question for you, Madison. You know, it's been almost 3 years since this incident occurred. There has already been a semi-lengthy civil trial in this case. We mentioned all of the media coverage, and yet you mentioned how Ebony Parker became emotional at times within the courtroom. You did say that a lot of that was during the reading of the charges. Anything else in particular you can point to that led to that emotion? Obviously, it's an overwhelming day no matter what, but it's been a long lead up to this, and then to see those emotions come out on day one. Any other details regarding that?
Well, no, I think it brings an element of humanization to this case. Obviously, there are so many people who are invested here, but for Dr. Ebony Parker, this is her life that's on the line. Obviously, emotions are going to be running high. When we went to recess and we did see her break down a little bit, that's only to be expected in a case this large, right? You know, it just brings that a little bit of human element here, and we're also seeing that human element from some of the jurors. Again, all of those names are being covered, and there is that layer of anonymity, but across the people who have been here, we did see one of those jurors friends with Abby Zwerner, who they had brought up was a concern for them about being involved in this case. So we've got people who are closer than maybe some people realize who have been selected as potential jurors, but that's the job now of the court system, right? To kind of field those questions, get those responses, and then be able to act accordingly to fill those seats to make sure that, as we've heard time and time again, just today alone, to make sure that this is a fair and balanced trial.
Okay, Madison Schlegel live at the trial with Dr. Ebony Parker. She'll be there all week. She's already been providing us a ton of coverage, detail, and updates today. Madison, we appreciate it. Thanks for spending a little bit of time this is your lunch break as well with this recess. So thanks for taking a little bit of time to update us here on Live Impact News. We'll see you throughout the week.
Thanks, Connor. I appreciate it.
All right, that's Madison Schlegel. And Madison mentioned something very interesting there that I want to continue to emphasize, which is, you know, article after article regarding this case. Years of coverage, years of discussion, not just about the case itself, but about all of the socio-political issues that go into this particular dynamic, right? Not only do you have childcare, public school safety, gun control, all these different issues that sort of underline this case. It looks like Madison may have one more update for us. Naya, is that right? I saw she may have been trying to get our attention there.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
No, okay, all good to go. Okay. Okay, thanks, Madison. Well, we appreciate the update that you did give. We got the thumbs up from Madison. We're good to go. So as I was saying, all of those different layers that go into this case and years of media coverage about this case. And, you know, you certainly couldn't blame someone for a sense of detachment or a sense of numbness sort of creeping into the observation of this case. But then you get into the courtroom and, you know, Madison did a great job of illuminating the fact that this is, you know, the humanity aspect of this, the humane aspect of this, the devastating consequences that came from that event, and the people that are still involved in this situation that has inevitably changed their lives completely and totally, flipped them upside down, really, and how these are still people who are going through this process on every different side. And so I thought that that was a really great point, and only natural for there to be a high degree of emotion involved in this trial, even after multiple years and multiple trials. So again, we'll be with Madison all week, getting updates, getting live looks outside the courtroom, and she'll be inside the courtroom at 1:55 p.m. when things start up again. Remember, there is that 30-minute delay, but once we get our live feed into that courtroom, we'll head back live out to Newport News as well. Okay, as for us at this point in time, at 1:16 p.m. on Live Impact News, we're going to take a commercial break. When we get back, we do have a live press conference featuring Alex Murdaugh's defense team. We talked a lot about that trial last week. It has been a retrial that is getting ready to start up. We'll listen in on that when we return, and then plenty more coverage to come. All right, back here in the Live Impact studio where we are going to go live out to a press conference held by Alex Murdaugh's defense team in South Carolina. We can give you some foundation on this case after we come back out. We don't want to miss any more of this press conference. It's been happening for some time. Let's listen in and then we'll update you on the case.
Siren of celebrity, which she definitely was. And then I'll tell you, this removal of the egg lady juror is very suspicious. And that really wasn't a part of the case. We do make it a part of our complaint. We point out all of the inconsistencies of what she said, reporting to Judge Newman that the egg lady, Ms. Crosby's ex-husband, had posted something on Facebook, which we now know was a bald-faced lie, or someone lied to her. I mean, it makes no sense. And if you have questions, and I would encourage all of you to follow up with Joe McCullough, who represents Myra Crosby, who is investigating this as strenuously as we intend to do so. And he's been working on it for quite some time. I mean, the way she was targeted, it just is very curious, and we hope to get to the bottom of that.
Is there any possibility of taking a plea deal for a lesser charge?
Say again?
Is there any possibility of taking a plea deal for a lesser charge?
No plea deal. No, never will plead guilty. Off the table. We want a trial.
Yeah.
They can dismiss them.
Yeah, they can dismiss these charges. You know what I mean? But he'll never enter into a plea which required some admission that he did something he didn't do. And that's murdering his wife and son. That's not it.
Who do you think did kill Maggie and Will?
We wish we knew. We think we could have found out if we had the tools available. I mean, that opportunity was lost when they failed to follow the tire tracks in the grass. leading away from the murders of Maggie and Paul. That opportunity was lost when they failed to maintain the integrity of the GPS data on Maggie's phone. Instead, it was at SLED downloading GPS coordinates at SLED that ultimately overwrote where her phone was and when it was on the night of the murders. And when they finally get into Maggie's phone and able to access the GPS data, you know where it said that phone had been last? Broad River Road, SLED Lab. I mean, that is outrageous that was allowed to happen. So, you know, John, we've gotten a lot of information. People are out there working on behalf of Alec for free, kind of like we are, and they've unearthed some really interesting stuff. And they've turned a significant amount over that to SLED. We'll be curious to see if SLED has done anything with it or will do anything with it.
If any of that investigation now goes back to the house or to the property, or is that a done deal?
There's nothing that I'm aware of that's of evidentiary value on the property.
Let me just jump in and say that the actual scene has been destroyed, right? It's been torn down, the property's been sold, the kennels, all of that are gone. So that's what this is concerned.
But our experts, preparing for the first trial, did all kinds of forensic tests on the crime scene. The number of we put in evidence that if somebody could be in the house and shots fired down the dog kennel, never hear them. I mean, we proved that without any contradiction whatsoever. So the story that he was up at the house and he had been heard the shotgun and the AR, not. We had an expert run test. Can't do that anymore. So the uncontradicted evidence is going to be if he was in the house, he wouldn't have heard the shots. So I mean, it's those kinds of things. And we've got measurements. I mean, very, very, very specific measurements on where everything was. Which, by the way, SLED did not do. You know, the night of the murder, as they processed, it may not be SLED, maybe local law enforcement, they didn't dust for fingerprints in the feed, not dust, they don't do that anymore, but they did not process the feed room for fingerprints. They didn't look for DNA. Is there a hair? Let's pick it up and get it tested. But there was a bloody footprint right next to Paul's body. It was a Carlton County Sheriff deputy's foot. I mean, I'm not a big CSI fan, but this looked to me like they violated every basic rule. We had a witness testify to that. So they got a lot of explaining to do.
What do you think the odds are of Alex getting an acquittal in the retrial?
You, John Monk, are playing the internet betting sites too much. I have no idea what it's
I'm not playing them at all.
Well, you ought to try.
What do you think the odds are?
We have no idea. I mean, we don't predict football, basketball, or trials.
Just following up on what Dick said about the failures. During the trial, you'll remember SLED explained how they do murder investigations, and they draw an imaginary circle, and in the imaginary circle that they drew here, Alec was in the middle of it. And he was in the middle of it from the night of the murders. And they knew that Alec left Moselle and went to his mother's house at Almeda, and then came back to Moselle and found his wife and son murdered brutally. And do you think for 1 minute that they should have gone to Almeda, to see if there's anything of evidentiary value? Were there murder weapons at Almeda, which they want to intimate, during the trial? Oh, he parked over here, so he must have got rid of the guns over there. I mean, they had the opportunity to exclude Alec from that circle, but they didn't do it because they just failed so miserably in what their jobs were.
I want to say one other thing that brings to mind. Most of y'all know I was a prosecutor for 12 years, and this is 40 years ago. If a body was found and they wanted to determine the time of death, the coroner or a medical examiner would take an anal thermometer and get a core body temperature, then take a thermometer and get the ambient temperature. And in this case, alleged an hour and a half prior they'd been killed, sort of. coroner showed up, and he did something that just amazed me. He took his hand and he stuck it under Paul's armpit, and then that same hand took it under stuck it under Maggie's armpit, and he could calculate the time of death based on that. I mean, that's what we're dealing with here, folks. Stuck his hand under the armpit? Really? And yet, then they say, oh, well, we know when Maggie stopped using her phone and Paul stopped using his phone, that's the time of death. They ignore the fact that cell phone service down there was spotty at best. A number of people testified there was no cell phone service. So simply because they weren't using their phone doesn't mean they were dead. I mean, this thing has more holes in it than Swiss cheese.
In your opinion, what ultimately got Alex convicted?
I think 2.5 weeks of that of widows and orphans and mentally disabled kids testifying, not that he stole their money, but how just maliciously he stole their money, how he lied to them. I mean, when they finish with that, they're not going to believe forensic evidence. They're not going to believe him. They're not going to believe anything because he was so vilified.
And when he testified, the jury was programmed not to believe him by the clerk of court. So, no matter what he said, he got on the stand to answer, questions about where he was and what he did that night. And we know now that, as the Supreme Court accurately described, she sought to undermine his credibility before he even testified. Understand, she's the second highest ranked court official in the trial. And she has closest contact with the jury, develops close relationships with them over 6 weeks. And, she is the one that they see more, she's the elected official. She summoned them all in. Her name's on the summons. Her name's on the check that they get to payment every week for serving on the jury. I mean, and this person is back there in the jury room telling them in so many words, don't believe Alec when he testifies. Don't believe the defense. Don't let them confuse you. All of that happened at the end of the trial right before we put up our case. So that is one reason we got convicted, I promise you.
You mentioned new evidence. If you already addressed this, I apologize, but you mentioned new evidence that you're going to bring out. You mentioned DNA found under Maggie's fingernails. Is there other new evidence?
Well, let me say this. If there is, we tell you, you're going to, I know you're not doing this intentionally, but you'll be telling them. Look, I don't think we tell you. How about that?
Fair enough.
Maybe not unintentionally. Anything else?
Do you think that Becky's done this with other trials before down in Colleton County?
Well, you don't know, do you? That's why this lawsuit is so important, because it's going to allow us to peel the onion on her and what she's done. In this case, with other people involved, was she a lone wolf? Has she done it on other cases? But certainly, it was a despicable act, and the Supreme Court found a piece of it. Anything else? Thank you very much for coming today.
Okay, we're back here in the studio after that live listen in Columbia, South Carolina from Alex Murdaugh's defense team. Now, Alex Murdaugh back on trial despite the fact that he was previously convicted of these two murders, his wife and his son. Those convictions were overturned. That was announced Wednesday of last week. They were overturned by the South Carolina Supreme Court because the court clerk at his trial, at Alex Murdaugh's original trial, had suggested that he was guilty. However, because of that court clerk action, because of the court clerk's actions throughout portions of that trial, his conviction has been overturned. Now, just because his conviction is overturned and prosecutors say they plan to retry Alex Murdaugh does not mean that Alex Murdaugh walks free until then. He's actually still in prison because of other crimes of which he's been convicted, financial crimes more specifically. Pled guilty to stealing around $12 million from his clients and currently serving a 40-year federal sentence at the same time as a 27-year state sentence for those financial crimes. So Alex Murdaugh remains in prison, but his murder conviction's overturned. He will once again be tried for the deaths of his wife and son. At least that is what is being reported as the prosecutor's plan in this situation. So we got to hear from the defense in that press conference. We'll take a quick commercial break, and then we'll move forward to more stories. Okay, welcome back to Live Impact News here on 13 News Now, the app. We are moving forward with some other stories of the day. We have spent the majority of this morning listening to, getting updates on, and overviewing the Ebony Parker trial that has begun this week in Newport News. But now we move on to a political race that touches on the redistricting wars and that touches on the strength of the Republican Party outside of Donald Trump. Or I am trying to find the words to best say this. I guess here's the best way to put it, is to what degree does President Donald Trump continue to have a hold of power over the Republican Party and really the Republican electorate? Obviously, we know that President Trump's approval ratings have been quite low across the board, especially since the start of the war in Iran, that the midterms are coming up and that redistricting wars are currently changing the landscape of how those midterms could look. But we also know that President Trump has for some time and still does maintain a massive amount of impact and influence with the Republican electorate. And in Kentucky, we will likely see a more clear example of where this stands. Thomas Massie is a representative from Kentucky. Thomas Massie, as a congressman, has been willing to stand up to President Trump in some instances. So now, in their primaries for that seat, a former Navy SEAL, Ed Gallerine, I'm hoping I got that pronunciation right, Ed Gallerine is now running against Thomas Massie for the Republican nomination, and the president has endorsed Ed Gallerine, the challenger, the retired Navy SEAL, to go ahead and win that nomination, to go and run for Congress in that part of the state. Again, this comes after Thomas Massie, as a congressman, has been willing to stand up to President Trump. Now, President Trump's endorsement is followed by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth at a campaign event for Ed Gallerine right now as we speak, live in Kentucky. So this race, sort of a microcosm that will give us a better idea going towards the midterms of where President Trump stands with the Republican electorate, a large portion of which has been staunchly loyal to him, essentially no matter what. How does that stand now in our current political climate? And this race in Kentucky will be a good test of that. Let's listen in now to the campaign event where Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is speaking right now.
When things get dangerous and chaotic, you move toward the mission instead of away from it. And right now, America needs that kind of leadership right alongside President Trump. President Trump needs those kinds of reinforcements. Because let's be honest about where we are. Under Joe Biden, Washington rewarded weakness. Corporate America cowered to the woke mob. Politicians served themselves, as politicians often do. And while all this is happening, the people who actually fight America's wars were watching their institution, the one they loved so much, consumed with nonsense. Woke trainings, political indoctrination, diversity quotas, climate seminars, pronouns, dudes in dresses. I'm not kidding. Standards were lowered, troops were undercut. We need more of that t-shirt right there. I identify as American. Americans watched our military become more concerned with not offending activists than preparing warriors to win wars. I've said that for years. America cannot afford a woke or weak military. We need a lethal and ready military. We need warfighters. We have ended the war on warriors. President Trump told me when he first offered me this job, he said, "Pete, you're going to have to be tough as shit." Sorry. He did. You ready? They're going to come after you. And boy, was he right. He was right. But that's also what Ed represents. A warfighter, a man forged through service. And here's the thing about men who come from that kind of world: they don't scare easily. Washington doesn't intimidate them. The media doesn't intimidate them. The Twitter mob doesn't intimidate them. Because after you've led men in life and death situations, the games that are played inside the Beltway start looking pretty small. Now contrast that with what we've gotten from Tom Massey. At some point, being against everything becomes an excuse for accomplishing nothing. At some point, constant obstruction is not leadership, it's just commentary. It's obstruction. President Trump does not need more people in Washington who are trying to make a point, especially from his own party. He needs people willing to help him win, to vote with him when it matters the most. And too often, Thomas Massey has acted like his job is to stand apart from the movement that President Trump leads instead of strengthening it. When President Trump needs backup, Massey wants to debate process. When the movement needs unity, especially at the biggest moments, Massey's willing to vote with Democrats. When conservatives are fighting the most radical left in American history, too often Massey's instinct is to throw elbows at fellow Republicans instead of the people who are destroying our country or want to destroy our country. And there's one man standing in their way, and it's President Trump. And President Trump needs reinforcements. And that's what warfighters do. They stand behind leaders and have their back. Warfighters understand mission. They understand teamwork. They understand loyalty. And they understand that in the middle of a fight, you don't weaken your own side. You advance to the objective. And that's what Ed Galrine understands because he has lived it. The best warriors, like Ed, are usually the most humble men in the room. If you've met him and you've met them, you know the type. They don't need applause. They don't seek the spotlight. They don't confuse publicity with accomplishment. Ed Galrine's record speaks for itself. Thomas Massey's record speaks for itself, too. Too much grandstanding, too few great votes. Years of acting like being difficult is the same thing as being courageous. It's not. Real courage means stepping up when the mission matters most, when we need that tough vote to beat left-wing lunatic Democrats the most. Real courage means understanding that this country is facing existential threats and deciding to be part of the solution instead of constantly trying to position yourself above the fight. Kentucky has a choice in this race. You can send a warrior, reinforcements for the president in our shared fight against the radical left, or you can send an obstructionist. In my mind, it's an easy choice. You can send a Navy SEAL determined to fight for President Trump's agenda and with his full endorsement to help save this country. Because I'll tell you, based on what we're up against, that's exactly what this moment requires. Strength, clarity, conviction, and unity. This moment demands leaders who love this country unapologetically, like President Trump and like Ed Galrine. Leaders who believe America is worth defending. Leaders who understand peace comes through strength. Not apologies, not weakness, not surrender. And leaders who stand with President Trump. In the military and in the past few years, I've had the chance in the front line to see courage under pressure, to see sacrifice, to see brotherhood, and that spirit still exists in this great country. It's incredible to watch the best of our country, the real 1%, do their job every single day on behalf of us with no desire for the spotlight. It is still very much alive. Don't look to Washington to it for the most part. Look to our country and to our formations. But now America needs to bring more of that same spirit into the halls of Congress. Now is not the time to sit on the sidelines. President Trump is leading the fight to restore American greatness. I have a chance to see it every single day. And what he needs and what he deserves, he needs reinforcements. He needs to bolster our ranks, not obstructionism. He has enough obstruction from Democrats. We need reinforcement from Republicans. And that fight requires a Congress full of warriors, including Ed. This one, ladies and gentlemen, is a no-brainer. Ed, thank you for stepping up. Thank you for your willingness to raise your right hand again. You did, knowing and understanding what you did in the military, you could have hung it up and done anything you want. Instead, you're deciding to get back into the arena. That says a lot about you in the toughest of races. It says a lot about you. You are badly needed. So good luck, Godspeed. God bless Kentucky and our great republic. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, back here in the Live Impact studio, you can tell just from the Secretary of Defense being there at this rally how much attention this primary election is getting. And it also is getting quite a bit of financial attention as well. Thomas Massie having his seat threatened by by a Republican candidate that President Trump endorses, whereas Thomas Massie has not received that endorsement, but rather a great deal of criticism from President Trump, despite being a Republican, as he has gone against Trump from time to time over the course of this second term. In fact, Thomas Massie was one of two Republicans who voted against President Trump's One Big Bill Act from earlier in the year, an act that added $3.8 trillion to the deficit, according to USA Today. And in an interview to USA Today, Thomas Massie told them, quote, "We all thought after the assassination attempt and then him winning that he would be even more galvanized to go against the establishment," he being Trump, of course. But he's been cooperating with them on spending on wars, and that's the 10% of the time that I don't vote with him, and that's got me in trouble. So Thomas Massie now attempting to absorb this challenge, a challenge that has the endorsement of President Trump and obviously Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. We do want to apologize for Pete Hegseth using some language that we typically do try to avoid having across our air. We apologize for that. We obviously did not see that coming. And again, this will be a race to really sort of give a better view on where things stand within the Republican Party, because we know that for a long time in that party, it's been as Trump says goes, what Trump says goes, and Trump says do not vote for Thomas Massie, instead vote for the Trump administration's candidate of choice, which is Ed Gallerine, a former Navy SEAL. And this will be, again, how much has the war in Iran and plunging approval ratings and high gas prices impacted President Trump when it comes to internally with the Republican Party and the Republican Party electorate? This race in Kentucky could be a very symbolic of where that influence stands, whether it is remains strong or has weakened. And you can tell by the presence of Pete Hegseth and the amount of money going into this particular campaign how important it is for both sides, I suppose, or two different factions of the Republican Party even. Now, we do have this plane crash that has come up again live, Naya. I know you and I were trying to get to that live. The feed went down, and so not knowing when it'll go down again, what do you say we go ahead and take it now and just give a very quick update? This is Westerly, Rhode Island, not too far up the East Coast from where we are right now. And as you can see, a plane crash just shy of the Westerly State Airport. And a very small plane, as you can see. And I guess it's a good thing we went, because there it goes. We made it just in time, Naya. They call that a buzzer beater. And we have one person who was, in fact, taken to the hospital following this particular crash. The only person on board was the pilot. The incident will be investigated by the FAA and the NTSB. And this happened less than half a mile from the runway, from that Westerly State Airport runway. Again, one person taken to the hospital, but we don't have an update on their condition. And so here we sit with a little bit of live footage, and there it is back up again. This is really a bit of a back and forth enterprise here with maintaining this live feed as they change their camera angle once more. But as you can see, a very, very small plane, but a plane crash always scary. Nonetheless, you see all the yellow tape that we had in that live shot as well, and it is back up. You can see the damage to the plane. Again, very small plane, but that is a rocky area over there. Obviously, sort of a bit of a forest behind that line of rocks, so obviously quite a few impediments that plane may have run into on its way down. But again, we don't have a reason yet. We do know there will be an investigation. Only one individual on board, the pilot, and we know that one person was taken to the hospital following this incident in Westerly, Rhode Island. And you can see a great deal of Westerly firefighters out there. And here goes our live shot again. We apologize for any motion sickness that may have caused. Good, Naya, feeling woozy? Good.
Feeling a bit dizzy.
Yeah, a little bit dizzy after that. We were moving around quite a bit here, but we still are privileged to have gotten a live look in. And good to hear that, well, we don't have updates on anyone's condition, but the only update being that one person was taken to the hospital and no updates on their status is it leaves us hopeful that there will be no major health issues to come from this particular crash. But that's something that we'll keep an eye out for, in hopes that no one is injured or worse from this crash. So again, that's Westerly, Rhode Island, a small plane crash just outside of an airport in that area. So let's take another commercial break here, and when we get back, we actually have an interview coming up in just about 11 minutes. We may have time to look over some other stories before we get to that interview. First, let's take a commercial break. Okay, we're back here in the studio, and you see me in a split screen here with lawyers for, or one lawyer at least, for Sam Altman, as there has been a decision in the OpenAI case. It was Sam Altman versus Elon Musk, in a case that was sort of arguing over whether or not OpenAI had illegally turned from a nonprofit into a for-profit enterprise. OpenAI, the parent company of ChatGPT, and Sam Altman and Elon Musk, two of the most powerful people in all of tech, two of the more powerful people in American commerce in general when it comes to their possible influence going forward with artificial intelligence and the resources they hold right now. Musk was at one point in time involved with OpenAI. He then went to sue the leaders of OpenAI, including Altman, after saying they broke their promises and abandoned their original nonprofit mission. And it appears as though a jury has sided with Sam Altman and OpenAI in this case. Musk versus Altman. Jury sides with OpenAI in landmark trial, says Musk's lawsuit was not filed on time. So the lawsuit was not filed before the statute of limitations timeliness kicked in. So let's listen in on lawyers for Sam Altman now as they speak on the dismissal of all claims against Sam Altman. Let's take a listen.
Certainly appeared to, because I think it rang very false with anyone who was listening to the proceedings. I'm sorry, ask me that question again. It's a little windy here. I feel his lawsuit was specious and was fraudulent, and the jury saw right through it.
Yes. No, I got here 10 minutes after. Just got there 5 minutes ago.
I think the public will be very relieved that somebody who was falsely, wrongly sued by Elon Musk, very close to the Trump administration, that he was defeated, Musk was defeated, and that a business person who put his career and his time and his energy and his life on the line for a breakthrough technology was rewarded against somebody who filed a false and malicious lawsuit.
No worries. This is fine. Okay, fine.
This is a multi-layered victory for both Microsoft and OpenAI, and this is a tremendous defeat for Elon Musk. So it's a good day for OpenAI and Microsoft. I can't speak for either of the two gentlemen, but I can tell you that during the trial, one of OpenAI's attorneys said, be careful about wanting to meet your heroes. Sometimes they can be a disappointment. You know, business is business, life is life. You know, who knows what happens next? The world is watching this today. It certainly is here at 1301 Clay Street in Oakland at the federal courthouse. There's every camera in the Bay Area, I think, is here, and every journalist is either here or on their way. So thank you very much for covering this. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Marcus. Go ahead, Marcus.
The real story, and I hope all of you will cover it, is that no matter who won, we all lost.
Yes.
We all lost. Sam Altman won, but look at who he is and what he's doing.
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
Sam's a good guy.
Understood. I appreciate it very much. Thank you very much. Bye now.
Sam.
Everyone here sucks.
Well, certainly an interesting conclusion to that particular press conference there. Obviously, as you can see, despite the charges against OpenAI and Sam Altman being thrown out, there are still people who don't consider him, what's the best way to put this? There are still people who are opposed to what OpenAI is doing, and as you can see, Stop AI Job Theft. There are people who are opposed to how AI is radically changing society in general. But the news to report today is that the charges against OpenAI and Sam Altman have been tossed out. Charges that were brought, or really not charges, but a lawsuit rather, civil charges that were originally brought by Elon Musk, and it has been determined that they were not brought in time. The lawsuit was not filed in time. So the lawsuit has been thrown out as it was not filed in time. And again, this goes well beyond what we see here today, artificial intelligence increasingly becoming a major pillar of society, increasingly becoming an impactful aspect of not just our everyday lives, but of the economy at large, and that will only continue. And OpenAI, Elon Musk alleged in that lawsuit that OpenAI was originally designed as a nonprofit with more of a purely altruistic goal, whereas he now saying that those promises were broken and that Sam Altman and OpenAI abandoned their original nonprofit mission. But again, what Elon Musk is alleging will not be heard in court, as that lawsuit has been tossed out for not being filed in time. Okay. So a jury sides with OpenAI in that trial, and being described, at least by ABC7, our one of our sister stations, as a landmark trial. So we will likely see AI going through the judicial system more and more often as we move forward in some form or another. It's similar to what we saw earlier this year with multiple social media trials, with multiple social media giants on trial, as their impact on society continues to become more and more realized. Then we now go to this next step where some of the damage done or some of the damage alleged is playing out in our justice system. That's obviously happening with artificial intelligence, only this time, unlike what we saw with social media trials, where it is an individual or a group of individuals who use those products then suing the corporations who create those products. This was two different tech giants, Elon Musk and Sam Altman, at one point both involved with OpenAI in a courtroom against each other. So a slightly different style of lawsuit here, but again, major, massive technological corporations in the news and going through our justice system in one form or another. Another example of that here today. Okay, we're going to actually take another commercial break. When we get back, we're going to have a special guest joining us. Kyle Kondik from the University of Virginia and Larry Sabado's Crystal Ball will be here to talk about some of those latest developments in redistricting, a story that is not going away and continues to see more and more changes and more updates. So we'll go through that when we return here on Live Impact News. All right, welcome back to Live Impact News. As we stated before, we now welcome a special guest. Kyle Kondik joins us. He's actually joined us before throughout this redistricting situation to give a little bit more insight. He's from the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia. Larry Sabado's crystal ball, always helpful when it comes to adding context and future understanding to what we're seeing in both national politics and state politics here. Kyle, thanks for joining us on this Monday afternoon. I hope the start of the week's going well for you.
Thanks for having me.
And, of course, anytime. And we're going to visit with an article that came out from the Center for Politics that you authored here just 4 days ago. And kind of a state-by-state accounting of where the edge will come in redistricting for the GOP following this latest round after the Supreme Court decision that weakened the Voting Rights Act. Are you able to give us, obviously you never truly know what's going to happen until the midterms occur, but major headlines on how you see the GOP benefiting from where things stand in redistricting as they are right now?
Yeah, if you assume that Alabama, Louisiana, and South Carolina redraw their maps in such a way that the Republicans end up netting a single seat from all three of those states, which it seems to be like where we're headed, although there's still hoops that need to be jumped through in all three of those states. But then you kind of look at redistricting in totality beyond that. I get a gain of 7 seats for Republicans, and then there's sort of a range around that number because some of the districts that were changed either by Democrats, specifically in California, to help Democrats have a better chance of winning, or that were districts that were made more Republican to help Republicans gain extra seats in states like Texas and North Carolina. Some of those races are still toss-ups as characterized in our ratings. So we say it's R+7 with a range of 6 to 10. And the range could actually be larger than that because there are certain races that we're sort of tentatively putting in one party or the other's column that are re-rated as like leaning Republican or Democratic. And so that's those ratings can be overcome. We might be wrong about some of those. So certainly a gain for Republicans as a result of redistricting, at a time where the last 3 House majorities have only been really a few seats over the magic number of 218. 6 or 7 or 8 seats could be the difference, but this is happening in the midst of a political environment that looks very, very good for Democrats. And so my takeaway is that Republicans have helped themselves through redistricting, but not in such a way to make the House an actual kind of 50-50 proposition. I think the Democrats are still favored to flip the House, despite the Republican advantage from redistricting.
And seeing how thin those numbers already are in that mid-single digits territory, it does kind of illuminate how critical of a role the Virginia map would have played had it gone through. That would have just about evened things out, it looks like.
Yeah, and look, I think one of the ways to look at this is there are like 3 stages of this redistricting fight. So the first stage actually basically concluded last calendar year in 2025. You had 6 states redrawing. That was basically a wash between the two parties. California cancels out Texas. There were some other machinations. And then you get to stage 2, which was Virginia and Florida. Virginia was trying to add 4 extra Democratic seats. Florida's trying to add 4 extra Republican seats. Florida's map is in place as we're talking now. Virginia's is not. And so Florida helps Republicans to some extent. Now, look, I don't necessarily know if Republicans are going to get all 4 of those seats, but the map is certainly better for them than what the old one was. There is ongoing legal action about the Florida map, so we'll see if that ultimately, if anything comes of that for 2026, but our assumption is that the Florida map that helps Republicans is now in place. And then the third stage is the Supreme Court's Calais decision that basically eliminated protections for majority-minority districts. And the sort of initial dominoes from that decision have involved Republicans who control several state governments in the South attempting to draw out black Democrats from majority-minority seats. So that's what happened in Tennessee, for instance, where there's a single Democratic seat in that state in Memphis that was carved up to elect a Republican. So instead of a 8-1 Republican delegation in Tennessee, it's going to be 9-0 so long as this map is in place. And that's what we could also see in Alabama, Louisiana, and South Carolina. The Florida map also, I think, was basically drawn anticipating the Calais decision. And so that led to, or that probably reinforced some of the decisions they made on that map, specifically making it very difficult for Darren Soto to get reelected in the Orlando area by sort of changing the racial and partisan mix in Florida's 9th congressional district. So that's how we got here. In that, it was kind of a draw for a while, but then between Calais and the Virginia map going away, Republicans get an advantage. Again, based on what we know now, not all of this is set in stone.
And well, first of all, I will note that we saw live Congressman Steve Cohen, who spoke last week after his seat was effectively eliminated, or his opportunity to win that seat was effectively eliminated. He was very, very emotional press conference. So there's that human element to all of this. Going back to the big picture, we know that redistricting by its very nature will change how midterm races look and how the results of those races look. I'm wondering if does the fact that the redistricting battles happened at all, the redistricting chain reaction, does the very presence of this event nationwide favor Republicans or Democrats in general, just in terms of how voters feel? Will the vibe, I guess, for lack of a more professional word, that has come along with what we're seeing, will that have an impact on voters beyond just how the districts are drawn? As a political event, does this help Republicans, Democrats, or neither one?
The new districts themselves, on balance, help Republicans. However, you could probably take a step back and say, do Democrats have maybe a new campaign argument to make to say, hey, this Supreme Court and these Republicans in the South, they're, basically going to end up reducing the number of Black Democrats in Congress. And does that have some sort of motivational effect on Democratic base voters across the country? I mean, one of the things that happens in midterms is that the president's party often struggles because the non-presidential party is more motivated to vote and they don't like what's going on. And so could there be kind of an indirect enthusiasm boost for Democrats because of all these, sort of the net result of these redistricting machinations? The other thing is that this redistricting fight does not end in 2026. It's going to continue on into 2028. Democrats are probably going to, just like we saw in Virginia and California, succeeding in California, failing in Virginia because of a Supreme Court of Virginia ruling about the process after a vote was held. But you're probably going to see more Democratic states going to the voters asking them for help, to basically allow them to gerrymander the states. And they will have more ammunition to make those arguments by pointing to what's going on in the South right now in the aftermath of the Calais decision. And the Calais decision, again, initially helps Republicans draw more Republican seats in the South, but in the longer term, Democrats could be helped in certain blue states themselves because there are very heavily Democratic majority-minority districts that Democrats aren't going to have to preserve anymore, arguably. And will that have some sort of reaction or impact in terms of allowing Democrats to draw more seats? Now, there are a lot of complicated things here. I'd also say that my guess is that our understanding of the Calais decision is sort of incomplete. There's going to be more legal action to determine just exactly what the justices ruled, because it wasn't like a clear-cut decision as legal experts looked at it. So, again, those are things that we're going to find out about down the road here. But again, there may be sort of a political argument that Democrats can make about redistricting that might be helpful to them, even though on balance, these new maps are not helpful to them. They're helpful to Republicans.
And when you speak about sort of this whole process and you talk about how this might not be done, Democrats will likely have their own response to what we've seen and how there's even more understanding to come within some of the judicial decisions that have been made. Do you foresee any sort of natural end to this redistricting domino effect that we're seeing, or is it just going to keep going back around until some meaningful regulation is put in place or something of that nature? I mean, where do you see the future of this going?
I mean, I think ideally the parties would agree to sort of unilaterally disarm on redistricting and come up with some standards that the two parties can agree with that Congress could pass. And then, of course, that would have to stand up to judicial muster. This Supreme Court and the federal courts in general don't seem at all inclined to weigh in against partisan gerrymandering. So I think the court road is closed at this point. And it just seems kind of pie in the sky to think that Congress could, in a time of this partisan rancor between the two parties, that Republicans and Democrats could come together on some sort of redistricting solution, on what is essentially like the kind of the most partisan activity you could think of, which is gerrymandering. It just seems kind of crazy to think that that could happen. And yet that is probably what would need to happen in order to sort of stop this spiraling down. I think also what probably would need to happen is that maybe the two sides could come to an agreement if we get to a point where neither side is really getting an edge from redistricting. I mean, here we are speaking now, Republicans have gotten an edge, so they particularly aren't going to want to change the status quo. But if Democrats strike back and basically bring this to parity, and you just have these kind of crazy partisan gerrymanders all over the country, more so than you have now, maybe that leads to a situation where you could have some sort of agreement. But again, it just seems pretty unrealistic to think that that would happen.
Yeah, we seem so far from agreement of any kind here when it comes to this particular topic that we've been going over for some time now. But the last question I have for you is, you do say you've got in here that you see in terms of 2026's redistricting saga that we are nearing an end to sort of this portion of what is obviously a wider battle. Is that something that, just a few days later, you guys remain confident in that?
I don't know if I'm confident in it, but once Alabama, Louisiana, and South Carolina either decide to redraw or it fails for some particular reason, I don't necessarily know what would come after that. We are going to want to get some clarity about the legal situation in Florida, but in terms of states kind of reopening redistricting this late in the process, you're probably reaching the end of that. And again, the only reason why it's so scrambled now is because the Calais decision from a few weeks ago kind of reopened things in places where it seemed like redistricting was closed. So probably some more twists and turns to come, but I think a lot of it is probably now set.
Okay, very good. Anything else you would like to add, Kyle?
No, I don't think so. Again, I just think this is going to continue into 2028, and we may be in a period of American politics where you're going to see even more redistricting between elections than you'd seen previously. And typically that came about because of some court intervention, but this time it may not be about court intervention. It may just be because of, one side electing to try to redraw new maps or to ask voters to allow them to redraw new maps to try to get some sort of partisan advantage.
Okay, so potentially a new era here in American politics, and one that we have seen play out over the course of these last 6 months here, including right here in Virginia. Kyle Kondik, always a pleasure. We appreciate you coming on today, and I'm sure we'll see you again down the line before too long.
Thank you.
All right, the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia, Larry Sabato's crystal ball, and Kyle Kondik once again giving us a little bit more insight, not only into what we're currently seeing with redistricting, but what we could see going forward. And as was reported by our station here on Friday, the United States Supreme Court declining to hear the case from Virginia that Democrats had tried to push up to the highest court in the land after the Virginia Supreme Court had nullified the new maps that were drawn and that had been voted through by Virginia voters, by the Virginia electorate. So the map will stay as it stands for now here in Virginia with midterms approaching, despite the fact that more than 3 million Virginians voted and more than $80 million were spent in that special election, that referendum. Now, I was about to throw to break, but we have gotten an email update here from Madison Schlegel, who is still in court with the Ebony Parker case. And this is an attorney statement from Abby Zwerner's attorney. This just came across our desk 30 seconds ago, and I am going to go ahead and read this out to you right now. While the criminal case is separate from the civil proceedings, it exists against the backdrop of the City of Newport News' continued refusal to accept responsibility for the events that led to Abby Zwerner being shot. A civil jury has already returned a $10 million verdict. The fact that accountability continues to be pursued through multiple proceedings reflects the seriousness of what occurred and the absence of meaningful institutional accountability. And that is from attorneys Diane Toscano, Kevin Beniazin, and Jeffrey Brait. So that is an update from Abby Zwerner's attorneys. If you remember those civil proceedings they were talking about, Abby Zwerner brought a civil case against Newport News Public Schools and was awarded $10 million, a trial that we covered last year, Nia Campbell, sometime a little later on in the year. of 2025, I believe, though I would have to double check on that. Now, this current case, a criminal case brought against Dr. Ebony Parker, former assistant principal at Richneck Elementary School. Those 8 counts of child neglect. 8 counts, 1 count for each bullet that was in the gun. Not each shot fired, but each bullet that was in the gun. One of those bullets, of course, going through Abby Zwerner's hand and into her sort of shoulder, as we have covered extensively here. So a quick update there from that trial from our own Madison Schlegel, who is reporting from that courtroom as we speak. We actually got a text message from Sarah Calloway as well. We're still waiting on that trial to start up again for us here on our live stream. So for the time being, we'll take another commercial break. We'll be right back with more Live Impact News.
I'm like, what?
All right, back here live in the studio. We have a live event that is now taken off on one of our feeds, and it is Vice President J.D. Vance delivering remarks in Kansas City, Missouri. So let's go live out to that event right now, and we'll take a brief listen in as we approach the starting up of the Ebony Parker trial again. For now, Vice President Vance.
Of today's Democrat Party. And so I'm not going to ask you to agree with us on every issue because that would be impossible. What I will ask you is if you want to make America great, if you want to protect your jobs and hopefully build jobs in this beautiful factory, if you want to make our streets even safer, if you want to rebuild the American dream for the next generation, vote against the crazy leadership in Washington, D.C. Vote for vote against the congressional leadership that will stand up and say we care more about illegal aliens than we do American citizens, and vote for the leaders in Congress who have promised that they're going to fight for you. Because I'll tell you, as much as I sometimes am frustrated with what happens in Washington, D.C., the difference could not be more clear. There is one set of leaders who fight for you, that's the congressional Republicans, and there is one set of leaders who seems to relish fighting for illegal aliens over the people who built this country. So let me leave you with just one final thought. I remember, and I think a lot of you are probably like this, I remember driving through my hometown and thinking to myself, why is it that we struggle while other people seem to thrive? Why is it that if you try to work the system, you seem to make a lot of money, but if you work hard and play by the rules, the leadership seems to punish you? What I promise you every single day is that the President and the Vice President of the United States, the President and Vice President of this administration, we wake up trying to see this country through the eyes of a kid like me. We wake up trying to protect your job. We wake up trying to make your community safer. We wake up every single day recognizing that we have the coolest jobs anywhere in the world because this is the greatest country anywhere in the world. So what I'm going to tell you is because you come up and every day you work hard and play by the rules, we're going to fight for your tax dollars. Because you just want to raise your children in safety and security, we're going to fight for local law enforcement. Because you want to build great things at this beautiful factory, we're going to fight for great American manufacturers and the workers that they employ. Ladies and gentlemen, you make America great, and we will not stop fighting for you. God bless you, and thank you for having me.
All right, we're back on Live Impact News here with a live look out in California at what appears to be a pretty expansive brush fire, quickly moving and really engulfing a lot of the surrounding area in smoke. This is happening in Simi Valley on Monday morning. This is a live look, a live picture right here, and you can see just how much smoke has emerged from this brush fire. I mean, that is a massive area there that is just completely covered in smoke. From this sort of wide angle aerial view, you can't quite see the flames as much that are sort of creating that smoke. You can sort of see them. You see there's a helicopter dropping what I guess would be water onto the surrounding area, trying to keep that fire from spreading. You can see some of the flames along the line of that burn area there just a little bit, but I mean, these look like regular residential homes here that are just being completely overtaken by what are relatively thick billows of smoke floating up into the atmosphere there. We see multiple helicopters down there that are attempting to aid in this firefighting effort here. And yeah, you can really see how this is burning up rather quickly and moving with a lot of speed. It's being called the Sandy Fire, and it started spreading around Sandy Avenue, hence the name. This is according to the Ventura County Fire Department, and it's unclear at this time how many acres have been burned. But just looking at the video, it seems like quite a bit, and it seems like some of these fires are really quite close to homes and neighborhoods and residential areas. There's another dropping of water onto sort of the edge of that where it looks like they'd be, I mean, look how close that cul-de-sac is to the fire line there. That is remarkably close as that brush fire continues to move and those helicopters working to make sure it doesn't spread to that surrounding residential area. But then if you look over just above, I mean, it has already spread quite far. Look at all that area, all the land covered by burning brush fire and smoke. You know, we've talked a lot here in Hampton Roads about our drought conditions. We don't know the state of drought conditions in California, but there's been lots of areas of the country that have been struggling with these drought conditions after an incredibly dry April and even a somewhat dry start to May. Rainier than April, but still somewhat dry of a start to May. And this is just, you know, obviously we do not have the sort of expertise to totally attribute this to anything, but we do want to note just how dry a large portion of the country has been. We don't have any
Connor,
real
I do want to step in right quick. We got an update from one of our ABC affiliates out there in California that at least 184 acres have burned, according to CAL FIRE, they're reporting.
184 acres from Nia Campbell, according to CAL FIRE, and there is an evacuation order, multiple evacuation orders and warnings issued for several zones in the area. 184 acres burned, as that is here comes another helicopter. We'll see if we get another release of water here. They may be going back to fill up again. And these look look at the turn that helicopter is taking there, as these appear to be firefighting firefighting helicopters here that continue to drop large buckets, I don't even know what to call them, just giant water drops that come from these helicopters onto the edges of this fire. When they zoomed in on that neighborhood, you could see a lineup of fire trucks that's out there as well. But such a difficult thing to tackle here. And look at the smoke as it all comes together and just creates a really dark cloud there on the right side of your screen. So this is something we'll keep an eye on. This is the scope of this is quite stunning here as we continue to look live at Simi Valley, California. But for the time being, we are going to move forward with some other. Wow, look at this close-up shot here on what, gosh, those are really just appear to be homes in there. And some very dark smoke blowing in from, I believe, behind that sort of taller tree on your left side are open flames with very dark smoke blowing in from the other side there from the sort of larger brush fire area. And that neighborhood, I mean, we've got from the same update, the same source that Nia Campbell used for that for that 184 acres is the same source that tells us there's been evacuation orders and warnings for several zones. Just looking in on that close up there, you would have to imagine that that's one of the zones you can reasonably surmise, I think. So we're still looking for more information as to maybe how this started or what the expectation is for containment. All we can do right now is go off of the little information that we have and try to use our observation skills. But this is probably the most zoomed out viewpoint we've had here, and it really gives you a sense of the whole circumference there of that brush fire and just the immense amount of land that it covers. And hopefully, you know, obviously our thoughts are with all of the families in this surrounding area, because obviously, first and foremost, top priority in our mind is the health and safety of every single person around. And there you can see, look at that, just burning right through that vegetation there, just scorching that vegetation on the side of what looks like sort of a hill. And just, you can see how well defined the line of fire is as it creeps toward this cul-de-sac. You see people standing around there. You have to believe those are fire officials rather than residents. There's another one of those massive water drops to just, you notice how when they do the water drops, they do it right along the edge of the fire line, ostensibly to try and stop the spread if possible. But again, health and safety for each and every person who is in this general area. And then, you know, obviously that is what you think about first, second, and third. And then, of course, the loss of homes, the loss of cars that could come into play here, the loss of property. And it looks like maybe this is a slow motion video of looks like things slowed down there. Maybe that's just the optical illusion of the helicopter moving so fast that things almost kind of slowed down a little bit. Looks like Nia Campbell's brought up a map for us. You can see this is not too far north of Los Angeles. This is relatively close to the Los Angeles metro area, not far from, looks like what, there's a Santa Monica National Recreation Area there. And if we could zoom in just a touch here, Nia, again, let's see, yeah, just north of Los Angeles, really. And you can see where this has broken out. There's the Simi Valley. The Simi Valley is really the area that keeps getting described to us by some of our research as to where this has happened. And even beyond where it says Los Angeles there, you move up into all of that residential area there, that sort of dense residential. That's all sort of LA-related residential areas that is very, very close to where this brush fire appears to have broken out. And it looks like a structure. We've seen a lot of nature that's kind of been torn through by this fire, but looking at that image on the left, there is a very specific structure that appears to have caught ablaze and really looks completely and totally destroyed.
Looks like a fence of a home.
Yeah, I was going to say, with those cars there like that, very, very well may be a home. And so you hate to see that getting destroyed. And again, you hope that any evacuation orders were received well before that happened, and that any people that may have been in that home were removed or left or found a safer area to stay. But to come back to a home that once provided you with so much and now is likely gone based on what we saw just then, if that is a home at all, obviously by the nature of the fact that it was really destroyed by this brush fire, it was hard to tell exactly, but like Nia said, based on the sort of surrounding context clues, did look like that was just a home that had been destroyed. So
yeah, and I also, sorry to jump
go
in
ahead
here, Connor.
Go ahead.
I also pulled up this map because, just to give a little context, just last year in Los Angeles, we had those Pasadena fire, the brush fires, and they were talking about a lot of real estate agents out there, how much they had to deal with the homes that were impacted in those LA wildfires. So it's just shocking to see that, again, so close by. Now we have Simi Valley dealing with a similar issue, and those evacuation orders being called for residents in that area.
Just it has been something that, to your point, that we've seen fairly regularly over the past few years. It almost seems like an annual story now, and sometimes they are more heavily reported on and even seem to cause more damage, like those LA area fires. But it seems like it happens far more often than you would think or would hope, or than I remember being the case. It's sort of over the past 2 decades, just in the last few years, we have seen a lot of reporting on major wildfires breaking out in the Los Angeles area, the California area. There's that house again that we were looking at. So this is, again, yet another fire in this sort of Southern California area that really appears to be eating up a large portion of that sort of brush nature area and then creeping on into some surrounding homes and cul-de-sacs, and it's just devastating to think. I mean, it's 2:38 p.m. We don't know when this started. It came up on our live views, not long ago, maybe 45 minutes ago, and you can imagine if there's families where kids may have gone to school and left for school and felt like everything was perfectly fine and close to normal, and then they come home from school and perhaps this is what they find. It's really a devastating thing to kind of consider, how quickly your life can be turned upside down in the event of something like this happening. So we're really hoping for as much good news as we can to come out of this, but looking at these images, it's hard to imagine good news right now when you just see those fires, just open flames burning throughout the area. And again, we saw those helicopters. You wonder, even the scope, right? We're so far zoomed out that everything can kind of look a little smaller than it is. But when you compare what we're seeing over to the right with just how small, even just the cars, how much smaller the cars on the street are than the open flames that we're seeing and the smoke plumes that we're seeing, it gives you a sense of just how massive this is. And I would imagine that if you're anywhere close to this area, it's probably something of a sort of dystopian feel, really, in terms of what you'll see on the ground. I mean, it probably doesn't even feel real. It probably feels quite bleak to look up and see this amount of smoke in the air. And if you're anywhere near, I would imagine the heat, the smell, and the sights are all pretty shocking. There's more of those helicopters flying around. Okay, well, this is something that we are going to continue to refresh our sources on and see what more information we can find. And then we'll come back to this after this break, perhaps, or maybe we'll explore some other stories. Now, anything else you want to add? Now, you had some really strong tidbits on this fire. Are the Pasadena fires that you were remarking on, those were 2025, and then were there LA fires before that even in 2024?
I'm not sure. I do know CAL FIRE is a great resource, and I was looking at the updates on that website at the moment, but we can take a quick break here and then come back to that if you want.
Okay, we'll take a commercial break here on Live Impact News as you see another helicopter trying to contain that fire line. Let's go to commercial here, and when we come back, we'll have more news for you, perhaps more time spent in California, but certainly updates on everything we've been covering going forward. Okay, we're back here on Live Impact News. We spent a great deal of time sort of examining that fire, and just as we were reaching the tail end of our view of that, we had our live feed of the Dr. Ebony Parker trial pop back up on our board here. So as they continue to go through jury selection, we are going to continue to listen in here, and we're going to take this opportunity once again to get back into this trial. We covered this trial for a large portion of our day already. We've heard from Madison Schlegel multiple times here today, especially just a little bit earlier here during their recess and our afternoon stream. And now they are back from recess. They are going to resume with jury selection. And so we are going to go live out to the courtroom now. Let's listen in.
She has 18.
So let's some numbers. Oh, okay. 79 was in both lists. 79 and 47 are in both lists.
That's the discrepancy.
Hold on a second. Oh, yeah.
So let me count them again.
I don't have this. Let me see. I don't have it.
All right, so we're at 16 now. And I'm going to read them chronologically, understanding that 15 has already been excused. 11, 15, 17, 22, 45, 46, 47, 49, 58, 59, 68, 71, 79, 80, 81, 83. Okay, and Council's nodding their head in the affirmative. Okay, so I'm going to pass this to the bailiff to have them call those persons in, and we can excuse them. Those that agreed for cause. And again, 15, we already let 15 go.
Here you go.
And while they're doing that, so we started with 84. We're subtracting 16. And we need to have at least 24 to get to peremptory strikes.
Lacy.
You don't have to go all the way.
All present.
Thank you very much. All right, and I'm going to take attendance. So we'll start with the gentleman in the first row to the wall, mine far right. And if you just read your number, so I want to make sure we have the right numbers in the courtroom, the right juror numbers.
11.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back here in the studio. We are being extra cautious when it comes to jury selection. We do not want to inadvertently identify any of the potential jurors. Now, they have been keeping them off camera. They have, as you heard, when the judge was reading that list, and it's a list that she then gave to the sheriff's deputy, and then he went and brought in a group of people. That's when the camera moved to the side, when that group of people came in. The numbers she read off were potential jurors. She gave the list to the deputy went to the back and brought those potential jurors out into the courtroom. Now she is speaking directly with those potential jurors, but we believe she's going to identify them by number. We know that the camera in the courtroom is going to avoid their faces, but we just want to be as careful as possible when it comes to this type of situation. It is better to proceed with an abundance of caution. Again, we do not want to inadvertently identify any potential jurors. Now, you did see when the cameraman moved the camera all the way to the right, as those potential jurors were entering the courtroom, you did see Ebony Parker sitting at the desk there in the courtroom, sort of continuing to observe the proceedings. We know from speaking with Madison Schlegel earlier in our show that at one point, Ebony Parker actually became emotional during this, especially when they were reading the 8 charges out, 8 identical charges, one for each bullet that was in that gun that the 6-year-old used to shoot teacher Abby Zwerner at Richneck Elementary School in January of 2023. So we know that there were emotions and tensions within the courtroom throughout the early portion of this trial, but they've moved on to really some technical aspects here as the two teams are now proceeding through jury selection. You see sheriff's deputies continuing to transverse the area as they bring people in and out and get them situated. And we have our judge now who is sort of taking control of the proceedings. And I have gotten a word that we need to take a brief commercial break. And when we get back, we'll continue to visit with this trial as long as we're able to without doing any of the things that we've talked about. We'll check in on that fire one more time, which continues to rage, and then we will get out of here for the day. So stay with us. Live Impact News. Okay, back here in the Live Impact studio where that trial is continuing, but a number of people have stood up in the courtroom, sort of blocking our view there out at the trial for Dr. Ebony Parker. So we're going to go back to the fire that we're seeing in California. I had gotten a little bit confused about the Palisades fire and the LA wildfires, but it appears as though January 2025 is sort of the overarching defining Palisades, Los Angeles area wildfires. Again, January 2025, and they are still recovering from that to this day. But this, an entirely new fire in Simi Valley, a brush fire that has spread rapidly, and one that has covered at least 184 acres at least. Now, Naya, what are you seeing? I know that you've been on Cali Fire here while we observe this. Are you seeing anything of note?
This is just the update that I see from Cal Fire. It's saying that this started around 10:50 a.m. this morning. The latest update was at 11:28. That's when we got the 184 acres were burning. It's only covering one county, which is Ventura. And then the cause is still under investigation. So we still don't know what caused this fire.
So you wonder, I mean, we obviously, again, we don't have any expertise here. We research, we learn, we showcase, we report. This is a very new event that Naya and I have had come across our desk. We're trying to show it to you while also continuously, and actually you can see the evacuation orders down towards the bottom as well. So look at immediate threat to life. This is a lawful order to leave now, and there have been quite a few of those, it looks like. Or it looks like maybe 4 different areas, 4 different evacuation zones, it appears, is what that is. So as you can see, things are quite serious in multiple areas there. But back to my original point. So we see something like what Nia Campbell just read, which is that the last update was at 11:28 a.m. Your initial thought is 184 acres at 11:28. It's now almost 3 o'clock. Has that continued to just burn through acres? But then at the same time, you also can see that there are helicopters working around the clock to contain this fire. So it's something that, you know, we must simply wait for more information to come in. We won't prognosticate on any sort of progress of this fire, but we wait, we learn, we lean on Nia Campbell to continuously check CAL FIRE for us, and we try to observe what we can, and we certainly can keep all of our thoughts and our well wishes and our prayers with those who are being affected by this. Is that a map from CAL FIRE?
Yes.
Okay, so this appears, go ahead, Nia, what are we looking at here?
This is just them showing what's actively burning right now at the moment.
And it looks like there's a real true sort of hazard zone there right in the middle, and then it also expands out to, and if you look, I mean, that closely resembles what we saw in terms of sort of, there is the large wilderness area where the fire is sort of coming from, and then there are those residential areas where it is just reaching the very outskirts of those residential areas. And this could also give you an idea of the fact that if it continues to spread, it'll likely be spreading right into neighborhoods, homes, cul-de-sacs, residential areas. So,
and I believe this red is showing, like, this is the fire,
right?
The orange, and then I believe the red is showing how far out the smoke is reaching right now.
Okay, all right. So the smoke heading out to that red area, and you see, I mean, looking on the screen to your left, you can see just how large that fire area looks. And then you go over to the map, by, you know, relevance, it certainly looks a little smaller. That gives you a sense of just how expansive that smoke coverage is. The fact that it is much, much wider than the fire, and that fire, based on our real-time view, is covering an immense amount of land, 184 acres. So thank you for the updates, Nia Campbell. We actually have gone past our time here. We need to close it on Live Impact News. We hope to see everybody tomorrow. Lots of coverage of the Ebony Parker case coming this week. We hope you'll be there for it. We'll see everybody later on.